Drive home from Galveston always felt the same. 18 hours of flat highway, the smell of diesel and salt baked into my jacket, a thermos of gas station coffee going cold in the cup holder. I'd done it maybe 40 times over the past 6 years. Same roads, same stops, same way my shoulders finally unclenched somewhere around Beaumont when I knew I was close. This time I was 3 days early. The platform had a hydraulic issue. Crew chief sent half of us home while they waited on the repair team from Houston. Normally, I would have called ahead, left a voicemail for my sister-in-law, sent a text to my daughter. But my phone had died somewhere around Lake Charles, and the charger I kept in the glove box had finally given up. I figured I'd just show up. Surprise everyone. I remember thinking that. I remembered the small, stupid pleasure of imagining my daughter's face when I walked through the door. Her name is Rosie. She was 9 years old that summer. She has her mother's eyes, light brown, almost gold when the sun hits them. And she laughs too loud at her own jokes. I used to tell her that. She'd laugh even louder. That was the arrangement between us. Her mother, my wife, Patrice, had passed away 22 months before that drive home. Ovarian cancer. Fast and ugly and not enough time for anyone to adjust. After that, it was just me and Rosie, and the understanding that the oil rig money was the only reason we could keep the house in Lufkin. Keep the lights on. Keep anything resembling normal. My sister-in-law, Patrice's younger sister, had moved into the spare room to watch Rosie while I was offshore. Her name was Willa. She'd been living with us for almost a year. I trusted Willa completely. That's the part I keep coming back to. When I pulled into the driveway, it was a little past 4 in the afternoon. The blinds were drawn. The sprinkler system in front was running even though it had rained 2 days before. I could tell from the wet clay smell still in the air. Small things. I noticed them later. I knocked. Nobody answered. I used my key. The house was clean. Too clean, actually. The kind of clean that happens when nobody's been home for a while. Not the kind that happens when somebody just straightened up. Rosie's shoes weren't by the door. Her backpack wasn't on the hook. The bowl she always left on the counter with the last bit of cereal hardening in the bottom wasn't there. I called Willa's phone. Straight to voicemail. I told myself it was fine. They were probably at the grocery store, at the park. I sat down on the couch and plugged my dead phone into the charger by the TV and waited for it to turn on. When it did, there were no messages from Willa. There were 2 from a number I didn't recognize, both sent 3 weeks ago. I'd never seen them because I'd been offshore with limited signal. The first one said, "Your daughter's doing great. Don't worry." The second one said, "She's learning so much. You should be proud." I didn't know that number. I hadn't asked Willa to take Rosie anywhere special. I hadn't agreed to any program or camp or anything that would involve a stranger texting me updates. I called the number back. No answer. I tried Willa again. Voicemail. I'm not a man who panics easily. 14 years on offshore platforms teaches you to stay level, solve the problem in front of you, not the one in your head. But something shifted in my chest right then. Sitting on that couch in my clean, quiet house, and I couldn't push it back down. I drove to Willa's friend's house first, a woman named Deb who lived on the east side of town and who Willa talked to almost every day. Deb answered the door in a bathrobe and looked surprised to see me. She said she hadn't talked to Willa in about a month. Said Willa had gotten involved in something at a church out near Diebel. Some kind of agricultural ministry program. Said she'd seemed excited about it at first. What kind of program? I said. Deb shifted her weight. I don't know exactly. Something about teaching kids responsibility and work ethic through farming. She mentioned Rosie was going to be part of it. She paused. I thought you knew. I didn't know. The church was called Harvest Creek Fellowship. I found it on my phone in about 30 seconds. A website with a photograph of sunlit fields and smiling children and a Bible verse about the fruits of labor. They listed an address on County Road 14, about 12 miles outside of Diebel. The website said they ran a summer youth program called the Growing Season Initiative. It said children ages 8 to 14 would learn the value of honest work alongside faith and community. It said enrollment was open to families in need of supervised summer care. It did not say what the children would be growing. It did not say he would be supervising them. It did not list a phone number that anyone answered. I drove out there. The road turned to gravel about 2 miles past the last gas station. The trees thinned, and then the land opened up into fields, mostly blueberry bushes in long rows, stretching further than I could see from the road. There was a white farmhouse set back from the entrance, a few trucks parked near a metal barn, and a chain-link fence along the property line that was newer than everything else around it. I parked outside the gate. I could see children in the fields. They were small figures moving slowly between the rows. It was a Wednesday afternoon in July, and it was 94 degrees. I know that because I checked my phone when I got out of the truck. 94 degrees, and the children in those rows had no shade and no water that I could see. I started walking toward the gate. A man came out of the farmhouse before I reached it. He was maybe 55, heavy-set, wearing a short-sleeved button-down and a pleasant expression that didn't match his eyes. He introduced himself as Brother Lowell. He shook my hand like we were at a church social. "Are you here about the program?" he said. "I'm here for my daughter," I said. "Rosie, 9 years old. Her aunt brought her here." Something moved across his face. Not guilt exactly. More like recalibration. "Our participants are occupied with their afternoon work right now," he said. "We ask that family visits happen on designated days. We find it's disruptive to the children's routine when—" "I'm not visiting," I said. "I'm picking her up." He told me there was paperwork. He told me the program had a 2-week notice policy for withdrawals. He told me my daughter's guardian, Willa, had agreed to the terms when she enrolled Rosie. I asked him if I could at least see her. He said she was working and it would upset her to be pulled away mid-session. I looked past him at the fields. The children were still moving between the rows in the heat. Some of them were bent almost double, reaching into the lower bushes. None of them looked up. "Which row is she in?" I said. "Sir, I really need you to follow the process." I walked around him. I heard him call to someone in the barn. I didn't stop. I walked along the fence line looking into the rows. Most of the kids had their heads down. Some of them glanced up and then looked away fast. Like looking up was something they'd learned not to do. They ranged from maybe 7 or 8 to 13 or 14. Some were wearing long pants in that heat. Their hands were stained dark from the berries. I was about halfway down the second row when I saw her. She was near the end of the row, bent over a bush, her hair pulled back with a rubber band. She was wearing a t-shirt that had been Patrice's, pale yellow with a small flower print near the collar. A shirt I recognized without having to think about it. Her arms were scratched from the branches. There was a stripe of sunburn across the back of her neck. "Rosie," I said. She straightened up slowly, like she wasn't sure she'd heard right. Then she turned around. She looked at me for a long moment. Her face did something complicated, surprise and confusion, and something else that I didn't understand until she opened her mouth. "Daddy." Her voice came out very small. "Aunt Willa said you weren't coming back." I can't tell you exactly what happened in my body when she said that. I can tell you that my hands were shaking when I reached for her and that I had to breathe very carefully through my nose for a few seconds before I could say anything. "What do you mean?" I said. She said. Rosie stopped. She looked around at the other kids in the row like she was checking whether it was okay to talk. "She said you didn't want to be a dad anymore, that you signed papers." I pulled her into my arms. She was lighter than she should have been. I could feel her shoulder blades. "I didn't sign anything," I said. "I didn't go anywhere. I've been at work. I always come back." She didn't cry right away. She just held on to my shirt, and I could feel her trying to figure out which thing was true. A boy a few rows over raised his head and watched us. He looked about 11. His face was dusty, and he had the same watchful stillness that Rosie had had a moment ago, the stillness of a kid who's learned to be careful about hope. "Mister," he said quietly, "can you tell someone about us too?" That's the moment I think about when I think about that day. Not what Willa did, not what Brother Lowell said next. That boy's face and that question, asked in the same tone you'd ask what time it was, like he'd already learned not to expect too much from the asking. I told him yes. I said it, looking right at him so he'd know I meant it. I carried Rosie back toward the entrance with one arm. She was too old to be carried, and she didn't protest. Brother Lowell was waiting with another man I hadn't seen before, younger, thicker through the chest, standing slightly behind and to the right like he was ready to step in front of something. Brother Lowell started talking about liability and proper procedure and the agreement Willa had signed. Her mother is dead, I said. Her father is me. There is no one else with legal authority over my daughter. Whatever my sister-in-law signed, she signed without my knowledge or consent. I kept walking. I put Rosie in the truck and I called 911 before I touched the ignition. The sheriff's deputy who came out was a woman named, and I remember this clearly because her name was stitched onto her uniform and I stared at it while I was trying to keep myself together. Deputy Sims. She was maybe 35, calm, and she listened to the whole thing while writing in a small notebook. When I told her about the boy who'd asked me to tell someone, she stopped writing for a second. Her pen rested on the page. "How many kids are in those fields right now?" she said. "I counted at least 14, I said. "Maybe more." She radioed for backup before she walked through the gate. Rosie sat in the truck with the air conditioning on while I watched from outside. 2 more deputies arrived within 20 minutes. One of the women from the farmhouse tried to get into a pickup truck and was asked to stay on the property. Brother Lowell stood near the barn with his arms crossed and the pleasant expression finally gone from his face. The children came out of the fields in a loose group, dusty and quiet. The boy who had spoken to me walked next to a girl about his age who was maybe his sister. He looked at my truck when he passed, and I rolled down the window. "I told them," I said. "I told them about all of you." He nodded once. Then he kept walking. Rosie had fallen asleep against the window by the time they started bringing the adults out for questioning. I sat there in the parking area with the engine running, watching her sleep, thinking about the 2 text messages I'd gotten 3 weeks ago from a number I didn't know. "Your daughter's doing great, don't worry." And I hadn't worried because I trusted the person who'd agreed to keep her safe. I found Willa at a motel in Nakadokas 2 days later. Not because I tracked her down. Because she called me. She cried for almost 10 minutes before she said anything coherent. What she said was that she owed money. A lot of money. That a man she'd been seeing had gotten her into a debt she couldn't see her way out of, and that Brother Lowell had offered her a way to clear it. She said she told herself Rosie would be fine. She said she told herself it was only for the summer. I didn't say anything for a long time. Then I said, "She lost 9 pounds. In 6 weeks." Willa didn't say anything after that. I don't have a clean answer about forgiveness. People ask sometimes, in that careful way where you can tell they want the story to have a tidy resolution. What I know is that I signed nothing and gave up nothing. And my daughter's belief that I had abandoned her is the thing I will spend the rest of my life making right. Not because she holds it against me. She doesn't, or at least she doesn't anymore. But because there was a moment in a blueberry field in 94-degree heat when my 9-year-old had organized her whole understanding of herself around the idea that her father didn't want her, and she'd kept going anyway. She'd kept picking berries and sleeping in a bunk room with 8 other kids and waiting. That's who my daughter is. Harvest Creek Fellowship was shut down 6 weeks after that day. The investigation turned up financial records, an arrangement with Brother Lowell's brother-in-law who ran a produce distributor in Lufkin, and a pattern that went back at least 3 summers. 16 children total in that program that season. Willa cooperated with investigators. I was told her cooperation mattered for the outcome, which I'm choosing to believe is true because it is the only version I can live with. Brother Lowell was charged with child labor violations, fraud, and several counts related to the arrangement with families. His trial was in the spring. I didn't go, Deputy Sims testified. I read about it later. She said the thing that made her request backup rather than handling it as a custody dispute was the boy who had asked to be remembered. She'd seen his face when she walked in and she said she knew before she'd said a word to anyone. I brought flowers to the sheriff's department. The desk officer seemed baffled by this. I didn't know what else to do. Rosie started 4th grade in September. She gained the weight back by October. She joined the after-school art program at her elementary school and made a painting in November that she brought home and gave to me. She wouldn't tell me exactly what it was supposed to be. I could see fields and something that might have been a yellow shirt and what looked like a door standing open with light coming through. She said it was about the summer. I hung it in the kitchen right next to the one she made for Patrice's birthday 2 years ago. She comes in sometimes and looks at both of them for a minute. I don't say anything. I just stay in the room. Sometimes staying in the room is the whole job. I think about that boy occasionally. I don't know his name. I don't know what happened to him after that day, whether he went home or into foster care or somewhere else entirely. I hope someone is staying in the room for him. I hope he learned that it's okay to ask more than once. I still do the drive home from Galveston. Same highway, same truck, same thermos going cold in the cup holder somewhere around Beaumont. But now when I get close to Lufkin, there's a light on in the kitchen window, because Rosie leaves it on for me. She started doing that about 2 months after everything happened. I never asked her to. She never explained it. I just see it from the end of the street, and it tells me everything I need to know about what we're building, the two of us. I always come back. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since that summer. Not in a dramatic way. Just quietly. The way you think about things when you're driving at night, and the road is empty, and there's nothing else to do but let your mind go where it wants. The choices that led to that blueberry field didn't start with Brother Lowell. They didn't even start with Willa. They started with me years before, deciding that being a provider was the same as being present. I told myself that the money I sent home from Galveston was a form of love, and it was. I believed that still. But it was also a way of not having to look too closely at what was happening in the house while I was gone. I trusted Willa, because trusting her was easier than building something more solid. I never set up a check-in system. I never asked Rosie the hard questions on our weekly calls. I took the surface of things and called it enough. That's not guilt talking. That's just accuracy. When you understand how you contributed to a situation, even a situation where someone else did something genuinely wrong, you get smarter, not harder on yourself, smarter. There's a difference. What Willa did was wrong. I'm not softening that. She handed my daughter to strangers to pay off a debt she was too ashamed to tell anyone about, and she let Rosie believe for 6 weeks that her father had walked away. That's a specific kind of harm, and it has a specific kind of weight. But Willa was also a person in over her head, making terrible decisions because she didn't know how to ask for help. She'd watched her sister die. She'd moved into a house full of grief and tried to hold it together. And somewhere in there she made a deal she couldn't come back from. I'm not excusing her. I'm just trying to understand the whole shape of the thing. Because understanding it is the only way to make sure I don't hand Rosie a version of the same situation 10 years from now with different names on it. Rosie is the part of this story I think about most. She spent 6 weeks in a field believing she'd been abandoned, and she kept going. She got up every morning and did the work and waited. There was no dramatic breaking point, no giving up. That kind of endurance in a 9-year-old isn't something you teach. It's something already in a person. I'd like to think some of it came from watching her mother face 3 years of illness without ever once pretending it wasn't happening. Patrice was honest about hard things. She didn't dress them up. Rosie absorbed that. What I try to pass on to Rosie now is simpler than any lesson I could have planned. I try to show up when I say I'm going to. I try to ask the real questions, not just the comfortable ones, and when she tells me something that's hard to hear, I try to stay in the room with it instead of finding a reason to change the subject. That's the whole curriculum, as far as I can tell. Not wisdom from a book. Just presence, applied consistently over time. The boy in the field, the one who asked me to tell someone. I still don't know what happened to him. I hope someone stayed in his room too. I hope he learned that asking once is not the limit, that you're allowed to keep asking until someone answers, that the world contains people who will come back even when you've been told they won't. That's what I want Rosie to carry. Not the 6 weeks. The light in the kitchen window she leaves on when she knows I'm driving home.